just like to address you for 2 minutes
Okay.
on the efforts he's made at trying to find a cleaner document for us.
Yes, thank you. Yes,
Thank you,
any
Chair.
luck?
Chair, some good news. We managed to obtain an unsigned affidavit. My partner and myself, we've gone through the affidavit briefly, and I indicated to my learned colleague as well, we're willing to provide everyone concerned with the relevant affidavit. Under the express condition, I think you will agree, if there are any differences between the affidavit that he has indeed signed and the affidavit that we are providing, that the affidavit that is signed persists, that will then afford us and Mr. Tabete then this evening to go through both of the affidavits to make sure that they are in order, and at that stage I think tomorrow morning we can quickly confirm that it is indeed the same affidavit, and then we can confirm accordingly. We also have managed to obtain annexures, so we will make sure that at the very latest tomorrow lunchtime that they will be available for everyone to assist.
Excellent. I think that's very good. Thank you very much for those efforts. That condition is reasonable, that until you have had a chance, and Mr. Tabete has had a chance to compare the two affidavits, the signed one and the unsigned one, to see that they are exactly the same. Until that happens, if there is any inconsistency between the two, the one that is signed will be taken to prevail. And if you confirm tomorrow that they are exactly the same, then that will be that.
Thank you, Chair.
But and also about the annexures, I think that's very helpful because there were quite a lot of annexures that are not legible as well. But so tomorrow is still fine.
And just on that point of the annexures, Chair, if there are certain other annexures that are referred to, the door is still open. We can provide them at any time, even if Mr. Tabete has finished his testimony.
Okay, excellent. I think I can say, certainly for myself, any document that is shaded in the same way that the affidavit is shaded, if you can get a clearer copy, or that would be very helpful. And there may be others which are not shaded in the same way, but the whole page is really black or very dark. So those two should be looked at, and even after the hearing, even after he has finished his evidence, if need be. But anything that can be obtained before, that would be helpful, so that one avoids, if possible, having to bring him back just because when he was giving evidence, certain documents were not legible. Yeah.
I think in that regard we'll be led by our colleagues.
Yes,
other than the documents that we have annexed to our affidavits.
Yes.
Chair.
No, thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Mrs. Tabete, switch your microphone on, please. Thank you. I had intended, just before we broke for the lunch recess, to bring your attention to practice note. No, it's an instruction note on enhancing compliance, monitoring, and improving transparency and accountability in supply chain management. This is the document that you have. I believe it was at divider 10, and it's labeled 10.2. And I will really just bring one paragraph to your attention for your comment. And that will be paragraph 3.1.1.
did you say 3.1.1?
3.1.1, Chairman.
Okay.
Could you please read that into the record, 3.1.1? And having done that, explain to the Chairman what you understand of just that one clause.
Submissions of procurement plans in respect of advertised competitive bids, in brackets, demand management. Accounting officers of departments and constitutional institutions must submit to the relevant treasury by 30 April of each year a procurement plan containing all planned procurement for the financial year in respect of procurement of goods, works, and or services which exceeds 500,000, all applicable taxes included. This procurement plan must be approved by the accounting officer or his or her delegate prior to its submission. For the 2011-12 financial year, the said plan must be submitted to the relevant treasury by not later than 31 August 2011.
Yes. Now, the date of this particular instruction note is the 31st of May 2011. Again, would it be an instruction note that would have been brought to your attention?
The question is whether you were aware of this instruction note at the time when you started on 1st April 2012 as the HOD or accounting officer for the department.
Not, Chair.
Or soon thereafter, maybe it might not be on that date, but in April.
Not Chair. Why I'm saying so, mostly the instruction notes becomes the documents that are in the custody of the Chief Financial Officer, mostly those that will be relevant. Then she can then, or he can advise, but the understanding is that each head of department should be aware of all instruction notes.
I would have thought so too, Mr. Tabete, especially given your particular circumstances, where you actually signed off on the SCM policy document in April 2012. So the expectation would be that you would really make sure you knew what you were signing. One, because you were a new broom in the department. Two, because you were a senior civil servant, really, or public servant. Am I not right?
You are correct, Chair. The instruction notes, when they arrive, they get to the head of department, you go through them, and you pass them through to the relevant official. You may not remember all of them at a glance, as you have read it through and then passed it on.
But this one is particularly important because it speaks of a procurement plan. And when anybody speaks of plans, whether they're procurement plans or any other form of plan, the HOD would always be involved in that. Or have I got it wrong?
It's correct, Chair. it clearly indicates that it has to be approved by the accounting officer, which means that plan should have been seen by the accounting officer before it goes to Treasury.
Absolutely. But I think that we are more or less agreed, Mr. Tabete, that at your level of operation in government, you would have been familiar, or you ought to have been familiar with all the prescripts relating to financial matters, certainly to procurement, which is what we're about today. We're in agreement on that.
Yes, Chair, I agree. Over and above that, it is prescribed that the CFO should also be there to advise the HOD. So
Yeah.
I agree.
The CFO,
I'm sorry, before you proceed further, I just wanted to say, for what it is worth, I note that this instruction note is addressed to all accounting officers of all national departments and constitutional institutions, that's one. 2, accounting authorities of all Schedule 3A and 3C public entities. 3, head officials of all provincial treasuries. It doesn't seem to be addressed to accounting officers of all provincial departments as well. I just thought I must just highlight that. I'm not sure what it may or may not mean, that it seems to be addressed to those people. It might not necessarily mean that a head of department in a province would not be aware of it necessarily, but it's just the fact of it being addressed to certain people that I'm mentioning.
Chairman, substantively, instruction notes form part of what becomes law because they are provided for in the PFMA. So they really become law of general application. It's just that it's a break, as I've understood it, they are breaking it down to be able to assist those who are applying those instruction notes or regulations. So
No,
it's on that premise.
I understand that, but I'm just raising it simply because there was a question about whether he would have been aware of it or was aware of it, and he did give an answer, the answer that he gave, but at that stage I had not picked up that for some reason in indicating to whom it was addressed, the National Treasury seems not to have included heads of provincial departments. That's all I'm saying, but what anyone makes of it is another matter.
I don't know if you want me to read the provision in the PFMA that deals with these.
No, you don't need to.
To reassure
it's
you.
It's a factual thing, yeah.
Thank
It's
you,
a
Chair.
factual matter of, it's addressed to certain specific people. That might not necessarily mean that there was no obligation on those who are not mentioned to make themselves aware of it, but I just wanted to mention that I've just become aware that heads of provincial departments are not mentioned.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Tabete, I would have preferred to go and now deal specifically with Mohoma Mobung leading into Frieda, but I think we'll do that in the morning because you've explained it so well at one level in your 2018 affidavit. So can I park that particular, I've structured all my questions, so I'm going to park that aspect and ask you about Paras. Now, in your 10th of August affidavit, it's the last affidavit in the bundle. I'll just take you to it.
Remember to identify which bundle you
It's-
talk about.
Exhibit HH10, which contains your affidavits. At paragraph 5 thereof, it's page 237 of what we call the witness bundle. 237, it's literally towards the back, right to the back.
Just 1 second.
Yes.
Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. As I understand what's written here,
And
it's
on
a-
what page are you now?
I'm on page 237, Chairman. 237.
237. Thank you.
Are you there, Mr.
Yes, I am.
Tabete? As I understand what's written here, certainly paragraph 5, going into paragraph 6 and 7, it's really part of the justification for going to seek Paras as a partner. Am I correct? You speak of the Free State not having processing facilities available to add value to the milk produced locally.
That's correct, Chair.
You speak of the fact that the milk was being transported to various centers in Gauteng from the Free State for processing.
That's
I'm
correct.
sorry, Mr. Rashe, I just pick up something here that I wanted to raise earlier. You see, that affidavit refers to annexures, but those annexures are not in the same bundle, and I don't know if they are in any other bundle. So as you read them, you are referred to an annexure, but you don't know where to find it.
Chairman, we received it. We received it like this from the legal representatives of Mr. Tabete. And I think part of the difficulty they have had is in locating documents that were seized, legally seized. So he really does not, as I've understood things, he does not have some of these records.
Well, I did understand from his affidavit that he didn't have access to certain documents, but that didn't help me when I was reading this, because it says, see annexure so-and-so, and there is no annexure so-and-so. And it may be that that annexure helps you understand better what he is saying in his affidavit. So I don't know whether they did, his lawyers did get a chance to try and obtain the annexures from whoever seized them and met with difficulties, or whether some attempts can be made to get them, because otherwise you don't get the full meaning of what he is saying, because you don't have the annexures. I think Mr. Fori may be wishing to say something. Maybe he might be able to throw some light.
Chair, thank you. You would note from the affidavit from Mr. Tabete, this specific affidavit is the affidavit that was annexed in the founding affidavit that was served in the POCA application. Now, I think it was SJS 5 as an annexure to that affidavit. And that was an affidavit that was gathered from Mr. Tabete during the investigation, if I'm not mistaken, during the ENS report, Stadium of Matters. Now, Mr. Tabete has indicated the original of the affidavit that was signed by him was obviously handed in, and the copy that he had of his full affidavit was confiscated during the search and seizure of the Hawks at that stage. So the only part of the affidavit that he had in his possession was the one that was provided for or provided to him in the founding affidavit. He had no other options, and you will note in the founding affidavit, the annexure that was annexed thereto, there's also several parts of the annexure that are missing. With reference then again to the affidavit of Mr. Tabete in his opposition of the founding affidavit in the POCA application, he also makes mention of that, and you will gather that they have omitted certain parts. But that is a discussion hurdle for them to overcome should they institute again. But that is the problem that he has had in providing all the relevant documentation as well as in his preparation, because they've confiscated the relevant documentation, and the only thing that he has with regards to this affidavit is unfortunately the documentation that they have annexed to their founding papers.
No, that part I understand, that he gave us only what he could get, what he has. What I'm trying to find out is whether attempts were made to say to whoever had seized those documents, to say, we are going to the commission and want to be helpful to the commission, but we need these documents, can you provide them? And maybe they refused, and whether also the commission's legal team has had any chance to do that. They might not have had because of the short time that they might have had after receiving the documents. So that's the part I'm concentrating on, to see whether we can look at attempts being made to contact those who should be having those documents and those annexures, because if they agree, then we can get them. That's what I'm talking about.
Chair, I think that would be most helpful. From our side, we have attempted at every stage in the proceeding to obtain. But if the Commission would at all assist in that, I think it would be beneficial, not only in this forum, but in other forums proceeding, if we could get a copy. We've not been successful with even a response, but if the Commission would be able to assist, I think that would help greatly.
Okay, no, thank you. I think the legal team should talk to whoever to see if we can get the annexures and whatever other documents would enable me to have a full and complete picture of what Mr. Tabete is seeking to convey. I would imagine that there would be cooperation from various agencies.
Chairman, we will certainly endeavor to do that.
Yeah.
I must point out, though, that few of these annexures are in the court bundle.
Yeah.
So, for instance, the beneficiary list, you've seen that before.
Yeah.
It's definitely in one of the bundles.
Yeah.
I know it's in the court bundle.
Yeah.
I think we have a couple of duplicates on that.
Yeah.
The bilateral agreement on agriculture, which is MPT3, we have a copy of that as well in the court bundle. Then there is the request to go to India, MPT4, that too is in the bundles, because these papers were next to the other court application.
Those that we have got somewhere, then simply copies must be made and they get attached here and given the bemarked MPT, whatever, as indicated in the affidavit, they get added at the back of this. Then one can get assistance. And those that we don't have, then attempts should be made to try and get them.
We'll do that, Chairman, under your instruction. Nobody will accuse us of fiddling with what was presented to the Commission by the witness.
Yes,
But,
I mean, I mean, if for purpose of technicalities, one needs to not put it as put them as annexures to the affidavit, because when he submitted it, they were not annexures. One can put a divider after the affidavit, but have exactly the same documents marked according to that, so that one then just goes there. Because with regard to some annexures, one can do without, but in some cases, you want to see the annexure that is referred to.
yes, Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
So when we come back, Mr. Tabete, to your trip, it's really first Paras. The essential question is, how did you locate this particular company as a possible strategic partner in the dairy enterprise that you were planning to establish? Where did you hear about Paras from?
Chair, I had done a research to look at countries that are doing very well in milk production, and the actual 4 countries came out, which we have looked at. The countries that we closely look at was Switzerland, very strong in dairy. We looked at Germany, and we looked at India. And we then compared the systems and models that they use for dairy production and processing. The model that we felt came very close to what we were doing was the model in India, which was done by Paras.
Can I interrupt you? Otherwise, there are matters I'd want to tease out with you. But please don't forget where you were going to go to, the rest of what you were going to say. So if we bring it back first, you speak of this research that was conducted. By whom?
Well, I did the desktop research.
You personally, Mr. Tabete?
I personally did the desktop. Some of it I had already looked at when I was still at the National Department of Agriculture. Some of them, I found them having been done by the Free State Provincial Department.
Again, can I pause to understand the interest in dairy, both at national department level and at provincial level? You are saying that there was an interest, therefore research had been done? Is this what you're saying?
Yes.
At national office?
I'm sorry. In regard to milk production, this interest that was there when you were at the national department, and that was there when you were at the provincial department, it was the same interest, namely on milk production.
Yes, but the one at the provincial department had already been there before I came in. There was research that was done before, but the research that was done by the department was done together with Germany.
The national department.
The provincial
department.
Yes, there was I would call it an initiative without a document that in front of me now, but there was a comprehensive study that was done, funded by the department together with with Germany that was developed and looked at for the development of the dairy industry in the province. So the one that we did was also then a continuation of what was done before. So the issue of the dairy has always been an issue to look at, and because it has been a problem countrywide, dealing with dairy.
Looking at that issue which you say has always been there countrywide, to the extent that there is difference between dairy and milk production, to the extent that we're talking about different things in the sense that milk production may be a much broader concept and dairy being a narrower concept in that regard. Was the interest in milk production generally, or was the interest in a dairy farm? Or just the dairy business, or what was the interest in really?
It was on both, Chair. The research on milk production for the country was done by the National Agricultural Marketing Council to look at milk production in the country in general. What are the trends and so forth and so on. So that there was that interest in the entire country in terms of milk production. Then when you zoom in milk production, there was milk produced in different provinces. And there was also processing of the milk that is being produced. So we then looked at, in the Free State, what is it that should be done? Because the trends that were done by the National Agricultural Marketing Council indicated that milk production was declining. And they had indicated in their research the reasons they think are the cause of the decline in milk production. Then we looked at the reasons for the Free State. Why was milk production? We found that the smaller dairies were the ones that were struggling. They were closing down because it did not make an economic value, because the cost of transporting the milk from their small dairies to the processing facility became excessive. Hence, a lot of them have been closing down. A number of other factories were in there, but the key one that we saw was the transporting cost. Hence, then we looked at the dairy itself plus the processing to be done in the province, so that that factor of transport cost, because the milk was being collected and the producer will carry the cost of the transport. Hence, then, a number of them who had the facilities ended up not continuing with dairy because it was not paying. Then that became a problem, specifically in the Free State. That research indicated to us that if we don't intervene, we might find a situation where a number of these dairies will struggle and close down. And if that happens, it means the production of milk in the country will then be affected. It means we may end up importing milk when we had conditions conducive for the production. The production was conducive, but the factors surrounding the production, which was you don't have the facility to process, the milk will be collected, go to Joburg in Gauteng, processed or pasteurized, it comes back to the Free State for consumption. So those are the reasons why we then looked at different models. How can we then intervene and make sure that we don't allow the continuation of the closing down of the smaller dairies?
Mr. Tabete, the question I had an interest in was one regarding your choice of service provider, your choice in this instance being Paras. I'm going to get to the research you may or may not have done in relation to the conditions for setting up a dairy farm in the Eastern Free State. I'm not there right now. I'm heading to India. So I'm interested in Paras. Now, we had an expert, you may know him, Davi Maria. He gave evidence
Yes.
before this commission. And he told the chairman that, in fact, Paras is not the biggest, the largest milk producer in India. There is a company that goes by the acronym GCNMF, which ranked number 18 in the world above Paras. Hence my interest. You have GCNMF, you have Paras. What led you to Paras?
Maybe we should start by saying, do you accept that the other entity ranks higher than Paras as a milk producer in the world? Or do you not accept that?
Chair, I agree in terms of the volumes of production. They might be the highest in the production.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just wanted so that her question then, when you answer it, then we know you are on the same length, because she accepts on the basis of Mr. Mari's evidence that it's there's somebody else who ranks higher than Paras. So the question is, what led you to Paras in circumstances where there was another entity that ranked higher in the world as a milk producer than Paras?
Thank you, Chair. The reason why we chose Paras, it was the type of model they've been using. Paras, what made us to have interest is that they have been collecting milk from small producers. Somebody having 5 dairy cattle, 2 dairy cattle, they will then milk, and then Paras will send a tanker to collect the milk from these small producers, bring it into their facility for processing, and also for whatever product that they were making there. Now, that model is the one that we envisaged, given the situation that we wanted to develop smallholder farmers with smaller dairies, which, when we looked at the research in South Africa, they were closing down because of the cost implication. And the model of Paras is that they've been encouraging them. In our case, they've been closing down. So we wanted to use that system so that we encourage them, the milk get collected, brought into the processing facility, and they can be given an opportunity to grow. Now, that is the model that led us to Paras versus the other models.
No.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bashe. Maybe this question would belong more appropriately to tomorrow when we have had a look at your affidavit, but I think I would like to put it now, because then I'll follow your answers to various questions much better. Can you articulate what the problem was, or what the problems were, for which you thought a dairy farm was the solution for the Free State? You have told me about small dairy producers who were closing down, but I just want to hear the full story. This is what was concerning me or concerning the Department of Agriculture, and we saw the dairy farm, the idea of a dairy farm as being a solution to these problems. This is what we wanted to fix. Because when you talk about your choice of paras, I want to link to see if it links with what you sought to address.
Thank you, Chair. As I indicated, one was that the small suppliers were closing down. Secondly, in the Free State, there was no processing facility for the milk that have been produced in there, which might mean that job opportunities of the produce that were produced in the Free State would be created somewhere else, and the milk come down for marketing. That was the one problem. Secondly, the black smallholder farmers had not fully entered the industry of dairy production. We wanted to bring them on board. The majority of them had participated in beef production, but not really in the dairy industry. So we wanted to bring them on board. Those became the problem, so that we don't decline the production of milk, we increase it. Hence, we looked at the different model.
Okay, let's just get that right. You wanted to address the question of small milk producers in the Free State closing down.
That's correct, Chair.
You wanted to get black farmers on board onto dairy farming.
That's correct, Chair.
Is that right? Is that third one, or those were the issues that you sought to address by way of this dairy farm?
Yes, the third one was to bring into the Free State a processing facility, value adding.
Yes. Okay, all right. Thank you.
There are a number of issues that arise from your answer to the chairman. And I think I'd like to explore those with you tomorrow when we talk about the research you conducted in relation to your choice of location for the dairy farm. So if you have access to Davi Maria's transcript, it's on our website. It would be useful for you maybe to have a look at that overnight, because he challenges a lot of the assumptions that were made in relation to where dairy farms are most productive. But I'd like to deal with that tomorrow. I really would like, with your leave, Chairman, at this point in time, to focus on Paras. And focus on Paras and India for a couple of reasons. In the examples you are giving now, the first thing that came to mind again that you will find in Davi Maria's evidence is, one, Paras was not the largest milk producer. Two, the area where Paras was collecting milk for processing relied largely, more than on dairy milk, they relied on buffalo milk. So I'd like you to apply your mind to that and to tell the chairman whether you took that factor into consideration, that in the area that Paras collects milk from, I think it was about 57% of the milk they collect is from buffaloes. Now, it's not what we do here. We have a different type of buffalo in any event. Those are water buffalo. They're not similar to ours. So much as that is milk that can be used in this country, we do not have that. So you go to a producer who's not entirely on fore with what you really want. So my focus is Paras.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't agree with the evidence that there is a difference in collecting milk from buffaloes and cattle. Because in India, the smallholders are keeping buffaloes for milk production. The only difference is that this is a buffalo and this is a cattle. But the quantities and volumes and the model is the same, whether you want it from a buffalo or you want it from a cattle. What we have been looking at is that the system that they've been using, in our case, is going to be cattle. In their case, in the majority, it was buffaloes.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what's happening.
No, they said.
One, two, testing, 1, 2. All rise. Testing, 1, 2. Go to the Michael. 1, 2, testing. Are we okay, guys? Are we ready to go? Why do you need the backup now? Can you run up and just put a pop on the desktop? I'll show you on
Okay, we can record it.
your laptop.
Yes, yes, we can. I've been recording. I just need a help, like, because the laptop. I feel the file. Yeah, that's why I wanted to
So
do the back.
can you go?
Yes.
Take that out, take that out.
Yes, let's proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Tabete, the simple point, as I understand it, that Mr. Maria was making was you're not comparing apples with apples, number one. Number two, they are not the largest milk producer in India. Then there are other issues in relation to our local conditions that he dealt with.
In India or in the world?
N-
You said in India. You said they are not the largest in India.
No, they're not the largest in India.
Oh, okay.
In India, Chairman.
Oh,
yes.
in India as well. I thought
Yes.
they are not the largest in the world.
No,
But,
no,
okay.
not in India.
Okay.
Yes. But be that as it may, what I have understood from your August affidavit, and you'll find this at page 238 of the witness bundle, you say that you had already identified the company by the name of Paras Dairy, upon where the research was going to be conducted. I'm quoting you. Paras were identified through the aid of internet assistance. I then officiated the meeting following the protocol through the office of the Premier in the Free State. Full stop. And you were elaborating on this desktop research when we last spoke about Paras. Could you continue? Because I really can't imagine that a Department of Agriculture or a Department of Agriculture and Rural Development would be relying on a desktop, Google, whatever it might have been, source for taking a decision to spend large sums of money on this dairy farm in South Africa. So all I want you to do is to help us understand how you stumbled across Paras. What convinced you that they were the ideal partner?
Thank you, Chair. I thought I had answered
No.
that I have done a desktop research across to check the trends of milk production, out of which I have also indicated that I do not agree with some of the statement mentions in the report of Mr. Murray. Like one, where he says India is not the highest milk producer in the world. There you talk about milk production. Anyone can Google and check who's the highest milk producer in the world is India. He then classifies it further and say it is not the highest milk producer of cattle milk. Then I agree. Then that makes a difference. But milk production, they are the highest, but not the highest in cattle milk production. Then if he does that distinction, I agree with him. But then, after I have identified and I've looked at the system of Paras, it was only then that I requested permission to go and visit India, so that what I have read is confirmed or no. They don't do it the way I've seen it, so it might not be applicable in South Africa.
What were the features of Paras' model of milk production that attracted you to Paras?
The main feature was the collection of milk from small producers. That was what was key for me. And also the success in doing processing of milk that was collected from small producers. They've been doing very well in collecting and processing that. That would have been an ideal system for us if we would agree that it is a success.
So, is what you are telling me that the key factor that attracted you to identifying Paras was the fact that they collected milk from small farmers? And why was that attractive to you?
Thank you, Chair. As I had also indicated that it was going to assist us to resolve our problem, which we had in the Free State of the small dairies closing down. Now, if you have got a country that is collecting from those small producers, keeping them active, we wanted to look at that model so that we deal with the problem, because it was either you upscale the small ones or they close down. That system was very attractive to say, if they can do it in India, why can't we borrow the same model and do it in support of the small producers?
But you don't complete the picture that I'm trying to get from you. How did you see that helping with what you wanted to achieve in the Free State? How did you see that helping there?
Yes, the way we saw it was that if we establish a dairy in the Free State that will have the capacity to collect the milk, we would then be able also to establish even more smaller ones to do the collection and bringing it for processing.
At that time, as I understand the position either from you or from previous witnesses, the numbers of dairy farmers in the Free State was going down significantly. Is that right?
That's correct.
So what you wanted was to establish a dairy farm which would do what you understood Paras to be doing, namely sell milk, not only milk that is produced on the farm, but go to small farmers and collect milk from them, and buy it from them and sell it, or what? What did you envisage?
Yes, the thinking was that we don't only collect and buy from them, but we make those farmers also part of to participate in the value addition of that milk.
Yes, but what you said, what was key that attracted you to Paras was the fact that Paras was collecting milk from the small farmers.
Yes.
Yeah, now applying that, if you were going to wanted to do that in the Free State, what did you envisage? Did you envisage that you would do what Paras was doing, namely go and collect the milk from the small farmers and do what with it?
No, what we looked at there was that they had a facility. What assisted them to be able to collect the milk, because they had a facility. When they collect the milk, they will bring it to the facility for processing. So the situation also then said to us, you also need to have a facility to process the milk, because collecting it and you don't have a facility at close proximity, it means you will collect it still and send it somewhere for processing. So you needed to have a facility whereby when you collect the milk, in addition to to what you are producing in that facility, then you are able to increase the volumes of processing and provide support to the small farmers.
You talk about collecting the meat. Did that mean you would buy the meat from the small farmers and then use it for whatever purpose? Or did that mean that you would not buy it, you would collect it, and when you have sold it, give the money to these farmers? Exactly what did you envisage?
Yeah, Chair, if Chair allows me, is then to explain the free-headed dairy model. Then it will clarify what would then happen.
I will allow you to do that, but maybe later, if you could just clarify this part for me, and then later on you could come back to it so that she can continue on her line of questioning.
Yes, that's correct, Chair. You will buy the milk from them.
Okay, and then use it in whatever way you wanted to use it for the farm.
That's correct, Chair.
Okay.
So, Mr. Tabete, I'm looking at an annexure here to Mr. Maria's statement. It's an annexure that sets out the 20 major dairy companies, and the data itself is relevant for 2012, 2013. And this data ranks a company in New Zealand as having the highest dairy turnover in US dollars, 16.4 billion. So you have New Zealand, then you've got the USA at number 2, France number 3, Switzerland that you looked at, number 4, USA number 5, Denmark, Sweden number 6, Netherlands number 7, France 8, USA 9, Germany 10, Canada, USA 11, Ireland 12, USA take 13 and 14 spot, Germany, a different company in Germany, France, China. Then India comes in at spot 18. And their dairy turnover for that particular company was 2.5 billion. So if you compare that 2.5 billion, just by way of example, with France, which sits at 15.6 billion US dollars, with New Zealand, which sits at 16.4 billion, I remain concerned about the quality of the desktop research you conducted, particularly when the National Treasury investigators asked you for a copy of these documents you had relied on, your desktop presentation. You were not able to produce those. Should I be concerned about the quality of the desktop research you say you conducted?
Thank you, Chair. I don't dispute the report of Mr. Murray. The commercial ventures that they are doing there would be different from what we wanted to do. There they are doing large dairies, big turnovers, doing agro-processing. Our situation was, we would not get to that level of their production. We wanted to assist smallholders, and those models wouldn't be applicable to us. That is where I do not agree, because he is comparing very high-tech, first world dairy production level with the one that we wanted to do. We had compared ourselves to a country similar to us, having the same kind of challenges, the same scale of farmers. That's what we looked at and said that model will be applicable to us. In terms of commercial value, they are doing very well, but we will not be able to apply those models.
You know, Mr. Tabete, I would understand your answer more clearly if you were saying to the chairman, because of the nature of what we wanted to do in South Africa, we wanted to encourage black farmers to move from red meat, from cattle farming to dairy farming. We then started off with this group of 10 farmers, local African farmers, and asked them to do A, B, C, D, and E. My difficulty arises when I look at what you spent on a facility that, as we'll explore between today and tomorrow, never worked in the manner that you intended it to, for a variety of reasons. So if you were going to start small, because we're all developing countries, you do that. You tried to build a state-of-the-art milk processing plant there. We'll deal with that problem tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We wouldn't go that route because starting small dairies and leave them at that level will then collapse again because we had that experience of small dairies closing down. So for us to start small dairies and leave them without properly setting up structures that will assist them not to collapse, it wouldn't help us.
No, I don't think Ms. Tabasha is talking about that. I think she's talking about you starting small, but with the aim of getting bigger. Not starting small and leaving it there.
In any event, Mr. Tabete,
Yes.
my understanding is that there was a milk processing plant in Harrismith. It continues to be there in Harrismith.
Yes.
There was a milk processing plant in Frankfurt, which is further north, I think about 60 kilometers from Vrede.
Okay.
There was a milk processing plant in Standerton, which closed down. So the premise that there are no milk processing plants in the vicinity of Vrede, where you set up this dairy farm, is incorrect. Hence my example of saying, if you had started small, your 100 farmers, you deal with them in terms of the cattle you wanted to give them, the dairy cows you wanted to give them, and use Harrismith as a quick example, where you then transport your milk to. I might have understood what you're talking about. It would not have cost you more or less 250 million over a 2-year period.
But maybe let's get the factual situation to be common cause, if it is common cause. Do you agree that there are those milk processing plants in the places in the Free State that she has mentioned?
Chair, I agree that there is a private processing plant in both those places, Frankfurt and Harrismith.
Yes, she then says, in the light of that, it's not correct. It was not correct for you to say there was no milk processing plant. I don't know whether in the Free State or in the vicinity.
Both.
What do you say to that, or both? What do you say to that?
Both towns are in the Free State,
Yeah.
Chairman.
She's suggesting to you that that was not correct. What do you say to that?
Yeah, Chair, I agree if she says they were processing plant, but they were not in a position to assist our challenge.
But did you say earlier on in your evidence that it was because there were no milk processing plants that you wanted to establish a milk processing plant through the farm as well? Was that your evidence earlier?
Yes, Chair.
Yes. So you,
Okay, let me go back again and try and explain it. The existing processing plant, in terms of capacity, you would go in there and sign a contract with them. And then, as a farmer, you will then be able to provide the milk. So they will come to you, test your milk, agree with you whether they will be able to take your milk or not. So a very limited number of existing farmers were able to utilize those because they were not very big. Hence, the trucks that were still collecting milk in the Free State to Johannesburg were still more than those that were supplying the factories that were in the Free State. So the problem was not resolved by them.
but we just need to get to be common cause, what is common cause, what you don't dispute. So you had said earlier on that part of the reason why you went to Paras, or you identified Paras, was because you wanted to have a milk processing plant established in the Friede farm, because there was no milk processing plant in the Free State or in the vicinity of Friede. So you now accept that, no, actually there were at least 2 milk processing plants.
Yes.
So that part was not correct. So she's right about that.
No, she's correct.
Yes. Okay, I think Ms. Tabashe, you can take it from there then.
Thank you, Chairman. But as I said, I had wanted to focus on Paras. You then traveled to India. You sought permission from the Premier, you say in your affidavit. And in fact, you say at page 12 of the witness bundle, paragraph 37.1, you write as follows. You say, my visit to Paras, India was approved by EXCO, pursuant to which Mr. Ashok Narayan was delegated by the office of the Premier to accompany me to India in his capacity as advisor to the Premier. It's page 12, paginated page 12, paragraph 37.1. I have your travel itinerary here. I want to start there.
Okay.
It's Exhibit HH, reference bundle D for Dolly, Chairman. D for Donald. And the page number is 1323, 1323. You will agree, sorry, Mr. Tabete. One, 323. There's in big, bold, black letters, number 669 from the old court papers. That's the one, that's the page we're on. But that's not our reference at all. Our reference is 1323. So this is your motivation to the Premier. First question, why would you be writing to the Premier and not to the MEC? I really don't know. Yeah, this is addressed to the Premier, Mr. Magashule, from yourself.
Yes, Chair. The approval for overseas trips has not been delegated to the MEC. So the approval gets submitted to the Premier for approval.
By all heads of department.
By all heads of department, by all persons in the provincial government who wants to travel overseas, you get approval from the Premier.
Was that the case with all other premiers that you have worked under, not just in the Free State, but elsewhere?
Yes. I've worked in Mpumalanga, that was the case. In National, the minister was approving.
Now, the second point is,
Well, maybe before the second point, Mr. Bashe, but even if the authority to grant approval was the Premier, wouldn't you write to the MEC, the person you report to, and if he approved, then he would be the one to write to the Premier to say, I'm asking that you allow my head of department to travel for the reasons that he gives in his memo, which I attach here to, something along those lines. Would you write directly to the Premier?
Yes, Chair. In fact, there is a template on which you write the submission.
Okay.
So you
Yes.
address it to the Premier. Then
Okay.
the MEC recommends
Okay.
for the Premier's approval.
Okay. In any event, you get appointed by the Premier as a head of department.
Yes.
Is that right?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay.
so under purpose in paragraph 1, you say the purpose is to request approval from the Honorable Premier to allow HOD for Agriculture, Mr. PM Tabete, and advisor to the Premier, Mr. Ashok Narayana, to undertake a trip to visit a dairy farm. Underline dairy farm,
Okay.
not a buffalo farm. And attend a meeting with a strategic partner in India from the 29th of February to the 4th of March 2012 in support of the expansion of dairy farming in the Free State. Mr. Ashok Narayana, who is he?
Yeah, Chair, can I start by saying a dairy farm is irrespective whether you are milking cattle, buffalo, goats, it can be any, it remains a dairy farm. So it does not only specify to cattle.
I know that in Botswana what's taken off is donkey milk. I will not call that a dairy farm. Chairman, it's a proposition I put. He's the agriculturalist. I happen to know that it's very popular in Botswana,
Yes.
donkey milk. I will not, people use it and drink it
Yeah.
as they would dairy cow milk. You cannot classify that as a dairy farm, Mr. Tabete.
It is, Chair. We also have got a goat dairy. We also call it a dairy farm. But you only milk goats.
Anyway,
So the dairy part relates to the milk,
To the
not
milk.
to where you get the milk
Not-
from,
Yes, Chair,
as long as it's a farm for milk.
for milk.
Okay.
you were explaining who Mr. Ashok Narayana is, and I really want it in relation to you. Who is he? Where did he come from? Why did he accompany you to India?
Chair, I think it's the submissions that I sent clarifies who is he.
Please clarify that to the chair.
Mr. Narayang was an advisor to the Premier, which then accompanied me to the trip to India.
Why Mr. Narayana? Is he a dairy farmer? Does he have expertise in dairy farming? That's really what the question is. Why this particular individual?
Yeah, why was he chosen as the right person to go with you to India, to accompany you to India on this project, on this visit?
I cannot answer, Chair, the question. The
You
person-
did not decide that yourself.
No.
So who decided that?
When I did the submission, the MEC indicated to me that I will be accompanied by Mr. Ashok Narayan,
Which MEC?
the MEC for Agriculture and Rural Development at that time, who signed the submission.
Mr.
was
Zwane.
Mr. Zwane.
So you were instructed to travel with Mr. Narayana.
Chair, it has always been the case. If the office of the Premier is responsible for the protocol. So in all my overseas trips that I have taken, I've been delegated a person from the office of the Premier. As long as it is an official
To
visit.
go with you?
To go with you.
Why?
They were very, because for protocol purposes, somebody has to go with you from the office of the Premier, because individual provincial departments did not have a unit for protocol. And a lot of these, if you don't understand the protocols of particular countries, then you have problems. So it was their responsibility to look at the protocols and assist you when you go to those countries.
But you were not going to a government entity there. You were going to a private company. So what did protocol have anything to do with this?
All the time, protocol people will assist you.
Yeah, my question is why? I mean, you're not going to a government department there. You're going to a private business to learn how they do certain things. So what's the relevance of somebody who must come for protocol purposes?
I don't know, Chair. All that we knew is that if you make a request to go overseas, the office will then be able to allocate you either in your submission or the person can be added in your submission who can then assist you.
Even if that person adds no value in the trip or in the purpose of your trip, they will just give you somebody.
The person will be allocated to you, Chair.
So you don't want to say, even if the person was not going to add value? Okay, all right. So are you saying you had no say on the choice of Mr. Narayan
Yes.
as the person to accompany you?
Yes.
Who made the choice? Who made the decision? You told me that Mr. Zwane mentioned this name as the person that would go with you, but the person who had the decision was who? Was it Mr. Zwane or was it the
Yes,
Premier's
Mr.
office?
Zwane indicated to me that in my submission I must include Mr. Narayan to travel with me.
Oh, so he said you must include that in your submission to
Yes.
say you want him to go with you.
Go with, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Now, I can find the record in our files. Mr. Narayana was appointed to the Advisory Council of the Premier in February 2012. Would you know about that?
No, I wouldn't know, Chair.
But does it make sense to you where somebody has literally just arrived a month ago in the Premier's office, not even in the Premier's office, he is part of the Advisory Council, which is an ad hoc council, that somebody who has just arrived at Advisory Council level is the person who is now your protocol officer? Would that not be strange to you?
I wouldn't comment, Chair, because I don't know what were the reasons they used for the choice.
Did you know, Mr. Narayan, at the time that Mr. Zwane suggested his name as the person that you must include in your submission as the person that should go with you? Did you know him at that time?
Not at close proximity, but I had seen him in other meetings where I
okay.
never had any interactions with him.
You had not had any interaction with him?
Yes.
You didn't know what his expertise was? You didn't know anything really about him, is that right?
Yes, all I know is that there were people who would be advisors to the Premier who would attend some meetings.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So I can give you the reference now, Chairman. It's page 1316,
Of the same bundle?
reference HH, reference bundle D, same bundle, Chairman, D, 1316.
1316.
That's correct, Chairman. There you simply have a letter of appointment.
Okay, let me just see. Oh, that's the letter of appointment of Mr. Narayan by Mr. Mahashule, the Premier.
That's correct, Chairman.
And the date is 29 February 2012.
Correct, Chairman.
And the date of the submission of the request for permission that was submitted to the Premier by Mr. Tabete is it was signed by Mr. Tabete on 24 February 2012. So it was, so Mr. Zwane must have asked you to include Mr. Narayan even before his appointment to the Advisory Council, because the letter appointing Mr. Narayan to the Advisory Council of the Premier is dated 29 Feb 2012, and your submission was made before that. At least you prepared it on the you signed it on the 24th of February 2012. There's no date for when Mr. Zwane signed it. And then the date when the Premier signed it to approve was 28 Feb 2012, one day before Mr. Narayan was actually appointed.
Correct, Chairman. So
Yes,
when the
thank you.
Premier signed this document, Mr. Narayana was not a member of his advisory council. And
And maybe you were going to address, to say this, but I see that the second last paragraph from the end of the letter says that the appointment was to be with effect from the 1st of March 2012.
correct, Chairman.
So when the Premier approved that Mr. Narayan must accompany Mr. Tabete, Mr. Narayan had not yet been appointed to the Premier's Advisory Council.
That's correct, Chairman. And
okay.
the very last sentence also explains the status and function of Mr. Narayana. The Premier writes, and I quote, "I look forward to working with you in your capacity as an ICT and project management expert on my advisory council." So he was not a dairy or agriculturalist. He's not a dairy farmer, as I asked earlier. It's not an agricultural specialist. He's an ICT teacher. Tell me, Mr. Tabete, at your level in government, are you not able to interrogate who accompanies you on a specialist mission? Because you are going out there with a purpose. At your level, are you not able to interrogate who accompanies you to places?
Chair, you can recommend in your delegation, in a delegation that I would propose, then I will then decide who the people that I would want to accompany. But those that are added in your list, you have no control over.
But who else was on your list, now that you mentioned lists, Mr. Tabete?
Chair, in this trip, I had asked for myself.
You were going alone.
Yes.
Is that usual?
I had undertaken other overseas trip alone to go and look at different issues that pertain to the department. In instances where I need a delegation, I will then do so. But in some instances where you want to go and visit and verify, you then go alone.
Did you not have a support team within your department that you were working with on this particular project?
There were teams in the department. All that I needed was to go there and confirm, number one, the existence of the company and what activities do they do, and whether they may have interest in assisting us.
But surely, Mr. Tabete, that's exactly why we have a high commission in New Delhi, if I'm not wrong, it's New Delhi. They are there to support not only organs of state, like provincial governments, but even ordinary business people who travel to those countries. Why did you have to get onto a plane and physically go to India? We have a high commission.
Chair, there are certain aspects that you need to verify as an agriculturalist, to physically go there so that when you proceed, you know what you are dealing with. Hence this trip was not a very long trip. Was to go there, verify, talk to the company, engage in discussions, and then come back. The intention was not to spend a very long time, just to go and verify.
Who paid for Mr. Narayan's return trip ticket? Was it the provincial government?
That's correct.
Was it the office of the premier within the provincial government, or was it your department?
It was my department, Chair.
Well, then the question that Ms. Abasha asked earlier becomes even more important. You have identified the need to go on a trip to India for a certain purpose for your department. As far as you are concerned, it's sufficient if you were the only one who went there. You are told now you must have somebody else that must go with you. And payment for that person will come from your department's budget. Surely, you must ask yourself the question, is there a need for my department to spend money for this person to travel to India and back? What is the value that this person is going to add to what I'm going to India for? Surely you have to ask that question as an accounting officer, as the accounting officer of the department. Do you not agree?
Chair, is not as easy a going into asking questions.
Well, it might not be easy, but I'm very interested in understanding what it is that makes it not easy. Because some of the things in our country have gone wrong and people have kept quiet because they say it's not easy. What is it that makes it not easy for you to ask questions?
Yeah, Chair, I would go back and say, the office is responsible for protocol. If the norm is, if you go overseas, then a protocol person must go with you. That was my understanding. And if this is the understanding, you would not be able to question, because there are instances where, even after this trip, where I had gone overseas, also carried the cost of the protocol person that will assist you in the trip. Because we have initiated the trip, they allocate the person to you to be able to travel with you. If in my own thinking, there could be a lot of other things that could be the reasons for somebody in the protocol to accompany. But I don't want to do speculations.
No, you don't have to do speculation. But do you agree that as the head of department, as the accounting officer of the department, if you are going to now, if your department is going to incur costs for this person to travel to India and come back, stay there for a few days, and your department is going to pay for those costs, there is a duty on you to say, if I'm asked the question, what value is this person adding? What am I going to say? Because if you don't have an answer, isn't the position that you should say to whoever, starting with Mr. Zwane, who made the suggestion, and maybe to the Office of the Premier, saying, but why must my department spend so much money on somebody's flights when really we don't need him? Why? I need to understand, as an accounting officer, how will I justify this? Don't you have to say that?
Chair, I didn't do it.
Yeah, you didn't do it, but should you not have done it? As an accounting officer.
Mike, Chairman.
I'm sorry, as the accounting officer of the department, as head of the department.
Yeah, Chair, in instances where I would have had a problem in paying, I would have indicated that I don't have the money.
So must I take that answer to mean that you did not have a problem with paying, with the department paying for Mr. Narayan's trip to India in circumstances where you yourself could not say what value he was adding to the trip? You didn't have a problem spending taxpayers' money on that?
Chair, I don't have an answer for the question.
But can you see that as an accounting officer and as head of department, you should have an answer? Because you have been entrusted with a budget. And it's your duty to make sure that the funds allocated to the department are used properly and for proper purposes. There should be no cent that is used without justification. Here comes a situation where you are told effectively to pay for somebody's trip for which you don't have any justification for them to take that trip and to be paid from the department. Do you agree that you should have raised that issue?
I agree, Chair.
Just the last comment on this aspect. I underscore the fact that Mr. Narayana was not an official, he was not a public functionary, was not an employee of your department, he was not an employee of the Premier's office, and yet you spent government money on a private individual who I'm sure could jolly well have paid for himself if he wanted to go to India. It just doesn't sound right, does it, Mr. Tabet?
Yeah, Chair. In the past, maybe also after this trip, we did pay for non-government people, in my department specifically farmers. If I were to identify a trip to go overseas, and we would like farmers to go and have exposure, we would then recommend that those farmers go with the department at the cost of the department. So that has happened before, but I'm not trying to justify this one. I'm saying that paying for other people who are not working for government, we've been doing and motivated for it.
Now, Mr. Narayana was a director of companies, so he's not a farmer who needs the exposure that you appear to be speaking of when you say you would take somebody from your area of expertise and competence, agriculture, with you on a trip. This is a businessman who is a director of companies, who has his own money.
I think he does concede that he's not justifying this one.
Yes.
Is that right?
That's correct.
You accept that here it was not justified?
Yes.
You accept that?
What I say, Chair, I should have questioned as the Chair
Yes.
was indicating to me,
Yes.
but I didn't question.
Yes.
Yes.
And looking back, do you accept that it was wrong that you didn't question?
I agree, Chair.
Yes.
Paragraph
Before that, of course, Mr. Tabete, part of what concerns one with this situation, but we will explore a lot of things, is to what extent could there be many other instances where government officials, to what extent would there be many situations where government officials should have questioned how taxpayers' money was being spent, but did not question, with the result that a lot of taxpayers' money was or may have been wasted. But if they had questioned and said, no, but I'm not going to be party to this because I don't see the need, maybe taxpayers' money would have been saved. So those are the issues that come to mind. You understand?
I understand, Chair.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Mr. Tabete, I'm still looking at that letter of motivation that you prepared. And my understanding of paragraph 2.1 is that it dealt with just conditions of service, costs related to conditions of service. Why was paragraph 2.1, which maybe you should read into the record, put here as a motivation? So paragraph
I'm terribly
2.1.
sorry, Mr. Bashe. I'm terribly
Yes, sir.
sorry. I only realize now that you are moving away from paragraph 1.1. So I just want to
Oh, I should.
ask one question on that paragraph before you proceed to the next one. Was Paras, at this time when you requested the Premier for permission to travel to India, was Paras already a partner with the Department of Agriculture in the Free State, or were they already a strategic partner?
No, not yet, Chair.
Yes. Why then in paragraph 1.1 did you say you wanted to, you were going there in order to attend a meeting with a strategic partner in India?
I think maybe the wording, Chair, but the intention was looking for a strategic partner. We visited there because we wanted a strategic partner. I think we had used the same wording also in the country when we say we met with strategic partners.
Yeah, you see, I don't understand that, because somebody doesn't just become your partner, business partner or whatever partner. A certain process precedes that. And you are not saying a potential strategic partner. You're saying you are going to meet with a strategic partner. So then I'm wondering, could it be that already some processes had gone before you prepared this letter, and Paras was, for all intents and purposes, already a strategic partner, or was the position that they were not? You were going there to explore or to see what they were doing and how they were doing it, with a view that if you are satisfied about certain things with them, then maybe they could be a strategic partner.
Yeah, Chair, it might be that we are not using the correct word, because locally we normally refer to people who are in the industry, our strategic partners. If I may use an example, in the Free State, you will have Grain South Africa. When we refer to Grain South Africa, we say they are our strategic partner because we are in the same industry. That's why I'm saying maybe then our choice of words might not be correct.
Maybe you are right, but it may be that Grain South Africa, you already have an existing relationship with them. It might not be formal, but maybe you have interactions with them. That's why you might call them strategic partner. But here you talk about an entity that, on your version, you had not had any interactions with before this. So, but I hear what you say. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. If I might point out that, you were actually going to try and just help me understand, or help the Chairman understand, more importantly, the reason that paragraph 2.1 forms part of the motivation for you to go to visit Paras. You may want to read paragraph 2.1 into the record, just so that we understand what is written there.
Yeah, Chair.
If you could please start by reading it into the record.
Provincial Treasury received the final preliminary allocation letter from National Treasury on the 12th of December 2011, an amount of 1 million in the 2012-13, which is 0873 million in 2013-14, and 873 million in 2014-15 has been allocated additional to our baseline to carry through cost on improvement in conditions of service.
Was that first figure there intended to be 1 million? You have got 1,000 million rand, which I guess would be 1 billion rand, isn't it?
Yes, it's intended to be 1 million, Chair.
There are 3 zeros there. Yeah, it's 1,000 million rand.
You are the author of this motivation, Mr. Tabete. You are the author.
Chair, I confirm that it is 1 million.
It was intended to be 1 million,
It
but
was
you didn't
intended
write
to
1
be 1
million.
million.
You wrote 1,000 million rand.
It's intended to be 1 million, Chair.
Okay.
Can you confirm that you are the author of this?
Yes,
Document.
I am, Chair.
So when we go to the next figure, which you have written here as 0.837 million, we can safely assume that you're talking about 873,000 rand. I don't know. This is really a question.
Yes.
What's the
No,
million doing there?
Sorry. Well, yeah, it's 873,000 rand. So, but there is a million there. But it might be correct technically because it says 0.873 million.
We are lawyers, Chairman, so maybe we don't understand numbers. But we take comfort from the fact that you say that's 873,000 rand. That's what you were recording there.
Yes, Chair.
Now, what has money that has been allocated over a 3-year period additional to your baseline so as to cover carry-through costs on improvement in conditions of service got to do with a trip to Paras in India?
Thank you, Chair. If you write a submission for a trip to go overseas, you must indicate that you have the money to undertake the trip. That is the reason why we then indicated that, yes, indeed, money is available, because you cannot get an approval to go when you don't have budget allocated for that purpose.
I'll let you.
I pass.
Oh, okay.
Chairman. Yes.
But that paragraph, Mr. Tabete, doesn't say we've got the money for this trip. This is where it is parked. It says Provincial Treasury received the final preliminary allocation letter from National Treasury on the 12th December 2011. On that sentence, we don't know yet that this is about saying this is where we have got money from. An amount of, I'll now read 1 million rand in 2012, 2013, 873,000 rand in 2013, 2014, and 873 rand in 2014, 2015 has been allocated additional to your baseline to cover carry-through costs on improvement in conditions of service. From what you are saying here, it looks like this money that you are talking about relates to the improvement of conditions of services. Is that right?
Yes, Chair, if I may explain it. In instances where you may not have enough money in the department, then you make a submission to Treasury for additional allocation. That normally happens during the budget adjustment. So in this instance, we had then been informed by National Treasury that we've been allocated additional money. Otherwise, when at a face value, when they would have looked at the budget, they would have told me that you do not have money. You can't travel. So I had to motivate that even though it has not shown in the budget yet, we had already received an additional allocation from Treasury, which allows us to continue the expenditure on that allocation.
But that allocation, additional allocation, was for something else, not for a trip to India,
No,
isn't
no,
it?
No, it was part of the condition of service where you then also pay
It was for the improvement of conditions of service.
for the department. It means it's
Yeah, but
operational.
doesn't that mean conditions of service of the employees of the department?
No, it is, that's what they call it. It's conditions of operation of services because
Well,
it is money that you are given to be able to do your work. Then it is the department that then classify where you want it to go.
So you are given this money on the basis that you can use it for any of your operations.
Yes.
Is that what you
Yes,
say?
yes, you are given.
And then it's up
then-
to you what you
to
use it
allocate.
for within the department.
Yes.
But what is this reference to conditions of service? You say it's got nothing to do with conditions of service of the employees of the department.
No, the condition of service, it means it's money that is allocated to you to do work.
Any operations within the,
Any operations within the department.
okay?
It means it improves you to deliver service.
Okay.
Yes, Chair.
Then we look at the next paragraph, and you link this trip to the SOPA address, that's the State of the Province address. And you say that the department will develop a dairy parlor and milk processing plant in Vrede, Sitsoto, integrated project, and Qwaqwa. Those projects are expected to create additional jobs for the people of the Free State. So the intention when you went to Paras was that you were going to build these processing plants in these areas and thereby create jobs for the people of the Free State.
That's correct, Chair.
But you say in paragraph 2.3,
Okay, maybe before you go that far, Mr. Bashe. In relation to 2.1, paragraph 2.1, I got the impression earlier on that what you were saying is, at the time you asked the Premier to grant you permission to travel to Paras, you actually didn't have money sitting in the department to pay for that trip, but there was money that was on its way by way of this allocation referred to in this paragraph, from which you could then take the money to pay for the trip. Is that right?
That's correct, Chair.
So I want to ask the question, what was so urgent about undertaking this trip before the money came through properly? Why did it have to happen at that time, even before this allocation came through properly?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The money was already there because it was allocated during the adjustment appropriation. And we had already received the letter from Provincial Treasury that the money has been allocated. It means it was there.
It was there where? I got the impression that you were saying it was on its way. The approval had been granted for it to come, but it had not yet arrived. That's the impression I got. Was I wrong?
Yes, the letter of allocation was given already on the 12th of December to the Provincial Treasury that we have given you the money.
Is that all that is required before you can use the money, or is once they have got the letter, the money must go into the department's account or not?
Yeah, Chair, in the province, normally the money remains with provincial treasury.
Yes, okay.
Yes, it remains.
So once you have got the letter, you are as good as
You have-
if the money is sitting in your department?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay.
Back to paragraph 2.3, where you note that the allocated budget of 17 million for the completion of 3 dairy plans would only be sufficient to cover the initiation phases of the project. Hence, there is a need for a strategic partner to partner the department for the completion of the projects within the specified period to comprehensively cover the value chain in terms of markets, further inputs, and other unintended occurrences. So, you are indicating here that there is an allocated budget of 17 million rand. Let me pause there.
Yes, Chair.
For the completion of 3 dairy plans. Let me pause again. 17 million rand for the completion of 3 dairy plans.
That's correct, Chair.
A plan.
Yes,
dairy plan.
just talk more about that. What plans are these that are so expensive? What plans are you talking about?
Yeah, Chair, the development of dairy plans is costly. First of all, you have to do.
Well, let's start with what is a dairy plan?
Yes, that's what I'm trying to cover, Chair. You need to do a feasibility study. You need to do an environmental impact assessment. You need to do a fully fledged business plan. You need to do a water allocation because the consumption of water in a dairy is also very high. So you need to do those analyses. You need to do designs for those dairies. And in all these, you need to get experts to assist you to do them. And then when you have concluded, then you'll say, I have a dairy plan.
So your dairy plan is a combination of all these plans?
It's a combination of a number of things that need to happen.
Okay.
I might have not covered all of them.
Yes, but basically what you are talking about is something that's really, well, I want to say basic, but that might convey a wrong meaning, but something quite essential in the sense that you want to know whether this project, this dairy project, this dairy milk production business or project that I want to undertake, whether it will be sustainable, whether it will give me what I'm looking for.
That's correct, Chair. Not only in a dairy, but also in a number of other agricultural activities.
Yes. Okay.
I want to pause for 1 minute to reflect on the 17 million for the 3 dairy plans.
Yes.
Prior to deciding on these dairy projects, did you sit down and work out any kind of costing for what you thought was a bright idea? Did you put money to the thought and work out an estimate on what it was going to cost you from beginning to end to put up these 3 dairy projects, which you mentioned in paragraph 2.2?
Chair, you can do a desktop study, but without having done the due diligence, you would not be able to say how much it will cost. You may have an idea, you want to build a house of not exceeding $1 million. But then the designs that you require will then inform you how much it will cost. So that is what we had in mind. This is what we want to do. Then the studies and the plan will then come back and tell us this is the cost. Then once you have the cost, then you decide whether you want to implement the plan, you will have the money, or you will not be able to implement the plan because you may not have that level of money.
So you will pay 17 million rand for something that you might not follow through on, simply because somebody had a bright idea and said, let's have a few dairy farms in the Free State.
Chair, hence you do what you call a preliminary study. You do a preliminary study, and your preliminary study will be something that you will mostly rely on desktop information because you have not done the details. That preliminary study then will inform you whether you can proceed and appoint. Now, a preliminary study tells you that, yes, indeed, that area is suitable, but you may spend money and discover that in terms of the environmental impact assessment, you cannot do it, it's declined. But you would have spent the money to do the environmental impact assessment. You do the analysis of the water, you do the analysis of the soil, you check them, either you get a positive or a negative. You will never have information that informs you whether you can do it or not without having spent money. So you have to do your assessment, and you pay for those assessments. And then the answer comes back to you and say, yes, you can do it, or no, you can't do it. It's like prospecting for mining. You go there and you drill. And after you have paid and drilled, you either say, yes, there is coal here, or no, there is no coal here. But you have spent the money. So if you want to do a dairy, you have to do an environmental impact assessment, whether it will say yes or no, and you pay for doing that.
But this is precisely the point. One, you must budget. You must have a budget. If I'm going to build a house, I must make sure that I save for a period of 5 years, so that when I eventually have enough money, I then follow through on getting designs, etc., etc. I don't start with the designs and then decide that the house is too expensive. This is putting the cart before the horse, and it will not be the first time, as you'll see between today and tomorrow, that I'll be making the comment. It can't be right, Mr. Tabete, that simply because I have a bright idea, taxpayers' money should be thrown into finding out whether this particular idea is practical or not. You see your mining idea, your mining example. I go to the bank, so I am taking on an obligation. I am responsible for dealing with that bank. It's not the same with taxpayers' money. You can't dream up something. It can't be right. That's all I'm saying. It just doesn't sound right that you dream up something and then you throw money at the dream.
I think give him a chance to comment on what you're saying, what you're saying to him.
Yeah.
What do you say, Mr. Tabete, about these propositions?
Yeah, Chair, I don't agree. I don't know, maybe it's only in the agriculture industry, but I believe it's also in other industries. Planning is not as cheap as sometimes we think. You have to do a proper plan, and you pay for the plans. If we are to develop plans for agricultural development, we have to do them properly, and it requires money. Plans at instances are being developed and they become negative, and you've paid for those plans development. At the face value, you may think, yes, in this site that I have bought, I can build a house. And after you have done the survey, your engineers come and tell you, you can't build this building here. So those are the things that will happen, because you will never know until you have done the study. So that's what happens in agriculture. You have to spend for your plans and designs and surveys, and then you come back and you say, yes, we can proceed or no.
Can I proceed on the same paragraph? You then say, there is a need for a strategic partner to partner the department for completion of the project. In other words, you did not have the money for these projects. It's a question.
Yes, Chair, we've realized that we would want to assist the dairy industry. But in our coffers, we will not have enough money to do so. Hence, we then looked for strategic partners to assist us and deal with this particular issue.
Again, tomorrow I will go through the Davi Maria document with you and address some of the propositions that you make. Chairman, I notice, I hadn't realized it's 4:25 already.
Yes, maybe, well, if you want, we can go up to past, but if whatever you have would be better dealt with tomorrow, that's fine. I do want to ask Mr. Tabete some question. Now, Mr. Tabete, if you were still going to have a feasibility study undertaken, why did you have to undertake a trip to India before a feasibility study was done? Because, as I see it, the trip to India could wait until you have a feasibility study that gives you a basis to say, okay, maybe we'll proceed, because the feasibility study and other plans that you talked about could have effectively said, forget, it's not viable to pursue this idea. But if the feasibility study were to come later and say that, and you had already undertaken the trip to India, you would have wasted taxpayers' money. Why couldn't the trip to India wait until that had been done?
Chair, it has to inform what you want to do. Because when you do the feasibility study, then you must be informed by what do you want to do. If I put an example, we might have done a feasibility study on dairy production, but there would be no factors that will inform us to say, after the dairy, then what? What would be the process and what would you do and the how part? So that was very critical to assist us, because the model that we've been looking at, we wanted to do we did not have. And we've been looking at different strategic partners. We've looked at partners in South Africa, like I have mentioned before, and said we would want somebody to come and partner with us to achieve 1, 2, 3, 4. And we were not able to get anybody that says, yes, we are interested, we will want to work with you.
Do you mean by this time you prepared this request to the Premier to give you permission to go to India, you had already approached other entities within South Africa to see whether they could be your strategic partners in this project?
That's correct.
Or do you remember some of them?
The major partners, Chair, that we had interacted with them, I think in one of my, I'm trying to think, in one of the affidavits.
One of the documents, okay, we can identify it tomorrow. We
indicated,
can
yes.
get the names.
Yes.
But I go back to my question. Why travel to India first before that study is done, rather than have the study done? And then if the result of the study suggests that this is something worth pursuing, then maybe then go to India. But it could say it's not sustainable. Then you wouldn't go. You wouldn't spend the money you would have spent on the trip.
Chair, the intention is to look at best practices. What we have learned in the industry, different role players do things differently. You may do the feasibility study, and when you get to an agreement with a strategic partner, you find that some information are lacking which they require to be part of the strategic part of the feasibility study. Because when you do that feasibility study, you indicate what information do you require. And then it is then done in line with the information that is being required. So if you don't know who you're going to be dealing with, let me use an example. You're going to be producing milk that it's only for local. I'm trying to get the correct way, but it has to be informed by your plans moving forward. Are you going to be cultivating for pastures? If yes, or are you going to be feeding the cattle standing there? Those things are very critical, because you may either do the soil analysis or you may not do the soil analysis. So it's very critical to be informed by what kind of systems do you want to run.
But I would have thought that the feasibility study and whatever other studies that may need to be done, the brief to the people who are going to do that would be, this is what we are thinking of doing. Do the study, do the research, do whatever is necessary to see whether it would be viable or whether it would not be viable if it's done along this model, but may be viable if it's done along on the basis of another model, or is guaranteed of success if you do it with another model. So they look at the whole picture, and they know the conditions in the Free State, they know the conditions in Friede, they know what's happening to dairy farmers around, they know the markets, and maybe you say to them, look at what's happening in other countries. If there's something that we might have to look at in order for this kind of project to be successful here, they go and do that. They come back with a study that says, you know what, if you are going to use this and that model here in Friede, it's not going to work. But if you are going to use this model that we see is being used in India by Pras, then this has a chance of working. Then you undertake the trip to India to look at Paras. That's my thinking. What's wrong with that thinking?
It can be done, Chair, along that way. It might be the expensive one, because now you have to do research on a number of models, and your cost will then increase, because those people that would apply will have then to look at different scenarios, and it might escalate your cost. Whereas when you are very specific to say, look at this model, then your costs are confined to that specific model.
So you think it may depend. In certain circumstances, you say it may be cost-effective to do the trip to India before you do the study, but in other circumstances, maybe it might be acceptable to do it later, depending if the study suggests that it's worth doing it.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair.
Okay. You reserve everything for tomorrow?
I'd like to, Chairman.
Yes,
It's been a
okay.
long day.
Okay. All right. We will adjourn then today. Do you request that we start earlier, or we should stick to 10?
We are in your hands on that one, Chairman. Mike, Chairman?
I'm sorry. Yes, in terms of your estimate of how much time we might need tomorrow, have you got an idea whether there's a need to start earlier or not?
I think we'll only finish after lunch, quite frankly, Chairman.
Oh, okay.
So if
So
you would
we can
prefer to
start
start
at 10.
early at 9:30,
Yeah.
we could do that.
Yes.
But we're likely to finish, even if we start at 9:30,
Yeah.
we're likely to finish after lunch, not before
No,
lunch.
that's fine. Then let's just start at 10 if we would finish anyway. Okay, all right. We are going to adjourn until tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll start at 10 o'clock. We adjourn.
All rise.